our panelists. Great to have you with us. Again, for the audience, it is a live session, so do please feel free to use the Q&A box and we'll get to your questions. But first of all, I'm going to move to the survey. So like our panel, which is a fantastically global panel, we have people from the US, the Middle East and across Europe with us today. That is the same as we saw as the respondents from our survey. So let's just take a little look now at the survey and also the responses that we saw from that survey. Can someone just give me a nod to say that they can see the connected packaging survey screen? Perfect, thank you very much. Okay, so what did we do? We had a survey with 18 different questions, very much similar to the questions and survey of 2022, but of course adapted slightly for 2023. We had 968 responses. This survey was carried out during the months of January and February. And as I say, this was 968 respondents from a global background. What industries took part in that? You can have a quick look here. So it was a good cross-section, looking at advertising, construction, FMCG, of course, automotive, travel, and other, of which there were 49 other categories. So it was a very big, broad look at connected packaging as a whole. Our first question was, have you used connected packaging as a brand in the last year? And here you can see the difference from 2022, which was 46%, to 2023, which to me is an amazing 81.5%. So a massive increase, almost doubling, which is showing obviously the popularity and increased knowledge, but also usage of connected packaging. So really, really important there. But the question would be, of course, there are still 19.5% who haven't taken advantage. And what is it that's actually preventing them from doing that? And you can see the answers here on the screen. A lot were just thinking about it, not just ready. So that was the largest, almost making up half of those non-users at the moment. Other reasons here: expensive, complicated, don't know about it, and not required. So very, very interesting again to be able to see the reasons why. And again, we can look at those. So if you do use connected packaging, as our question went, why do you consider it important? And here you can see the 2022 in the black versus the 2023. Very, very similar in terms of data collection, sustainable method, actually rising there. Very, very interesting, and perhaps indicating some trends there. Inform about product marketing decisions, possibility of direct interaction of consumers, customers, education of consumers about the product slightly dropped. I wouldn't say anything too significant there. So very, very, very similar, but maybe just that increase on the sustainable method. For the participants and respondents who had already implemented connecting packaging, what were the technologies that they were using? Now we have here NFC tag, QR code, and both. You can see here that the NFC tag was actually coming out higher. Both, of course, being 22.3. So, of course, that also needs to be factored into the responses, as it's not just QR versus NFC. Then we get to the money question. What's the maximum you would spend on a connected packaging campaign? Now, interestingly, you can see here again, 2022 and 2023. So in the black, you can see last year's responses, and you can see a very big difference there in the rise in spend from coming from the under 15K, moving to the 31 to 50K US dollar mark. So a big increase there in terms of that shift of what budgets would be spent on connected packaging. So again, I think very, very interesting. Again, you can see there quite similar in that kind of mid-range, 15 to 30. And actually interesting, there's a slight reduction in the 81K, but you can imagine, as you can see here, they are the lesser part of the respondents there. So that big jump being into that mid-range group. Then we move to gamification. Gamification being the use of game thinking, game techniques, game elements, yet in a non-game environment. So, of course, we're talking about that in connected packaging. Here, we asked the questions about those who've already used gamification, and we saw that 70% of participants had already used gamification in their marketing campaigns, and 18.7 had actually thought about it. So again, very high in terms of using gamification. And then the question followed to ask, what type of gamification did you use? Now here you can see the answers. Up on top was definitely a traditional mobile game, 56.9% there. An AR game coming out strong there at 30.9%. And then a little bit lower, 11.3, well, I say a little bit, quite lower, a little bit more in terms of looking at those main areas. Other than that, you had some other questions there, which is really looking at the goal. So what was the goal while using gamification? Really clear, almost 50% there, looking at the promotion of a new product or service. Also to note, there was mentioned as well, new flavour in there as well. In terms of the other half, you can see there that actually gather emails, gather phone numbers, and perhaps gather consumer insights for future campaigns all really do kind of lie into the same space, which is collecting first-party data, and then 15% there for branding. So very, very interestingly here, we could see that 87.6% of the participants are actually planning a connected packaging campaign in 2023. And again, we could see that is a huge number compared to last year's 46.5. The next question was asking about the importance or the increasing importance of the connected packaging to the packaging industry in the next 12 months and beyond. And here are the reasons for the rising importance. Again, here comes that sustainable trend here. It's a sustainable way to connect with and to educate consumers coming out top. It will become the main route to communicating with customers, very strong there as well. And really looking very strong, it encourages customer loyalty. Gamification coming out next. With gamification are valuable assets to engage with younger audiences. And there we have the data and insights and product information, recycling instructions, and very, very low insignificant other. So again, large proportion believing that connected packaging will be increasingly important, and those are the reasons for it. That leaves 8.2 that think it will not be necessary for the future. So, of course, the question is why? And again, we're talking about a very small percentage, but of that 8.2%, we have a very strong response, which is that customers don't really use it. Very interesting point of view there. Moving on to the next question, for the person who just asked if the slides will be shared later, yes, they will. They will also be able to be downloaded from our website as well. In terms of connected packaging sustainability, we heard that it was an attractive way to help improve sustainable credentials. In fact, 90.7% of participants agreed with this statement, which has increased almost by 11% from last year. And also, really, really interesting part where 88.1% aim to increase their digital marketing spend for 2023 as well. So the question then is, if you are planning to increase it, by how much? So here, again, the really interesting point around how much to be spent. How important will connected packaging be to your business in 2023? 1 being not very important at all, 10 being very, very important. We can see here that people are coming in around the 7 to 9 mark, which is very much so in the positive to the fact that connected packaging will be important to their businesses. And also we can then take a look at that comparison between 22 and 23. And you can probably see the biggest increase is that 23 as more people on the 8 out of 10. Again, as I said, 1 being not very important and 10 being very, very important. So definitely a big focus on the positive, which would be obviously 5 and above, but we can see that really focusing on 7, 8 and 9. So as a quick summary, I think the three main things that I picked out here when looking at the results here was the massive incorporation of connected experience into marketing plans already happening, the consideration of importance, and the increase on digital spend. So really, really big numbers there. And in fact, if you look here, you can see between 2022, which is in your bottom right-hand corner, versus 2023, which is obviously now just moved to the top left corner. So big increases, big numbers from 2022, all on that tipping point, but now very clearly in the positive top end of over 80% for each one of those questions. So that concludes the results. So now I move to our fantastic panelists, and I ask the questions, of course, of what do we think of this? And, you know, as I get to start, my first question, of course, is about the main general view. And, you know, it's very, very clear that over 80% of respondents are saying they've already incorporated connected experiences into their marketing plans this year. As I said, we saw this is a big increase from last year, which was 46.5 planning to use it. Paul, what do you think happened? What's happened in 2022 that's made brands change their mind so radically?
I mean, it's two or three things, but I think the main area for me is the sort of the renaissance of the QR code. I think, you know, pre-COVID, the QR code was presented to consumers and sort of embraced by some and not all, and that likewise for brand owners. But I think you know, since we've all the use of QR codes has become completely normalized, and you know, young and old are now using it, and brand owners are realizing that it's very straightforward to place it on a pack and make their pack instantly connected. So I think that's the main reason. I mean, obviously got things like the costs of NFC and RFID sort of coming down in price, or mainly NFC. That's the main application, you know, and just sort of and also really the strong realization of the opportunities. This should be part of any brand marketing mix, you know, to have that sort of instant connectivity with the fantastic side benefits of all the data you get with it as well. So I think the QR code becoming normalized is, for me, probably the biggest reason why we've seen such a big hike.
Yeah, definitely. And as more brands start to do connected packaging, then obviously you have this snowball effect if it is bringing positive results. Yeah. Mohammed, do you feel that that's reflective to what you're seeing? Do you have more brands asking you about connected packaging or smart packaging at the moment?
Yes. Actually, we can see since last year a significant improvement from customers, into requesting the connected pack. The end consumer behavior is keep changing, you know, and in addition to the supply chain needs as well. So what we can see is that our customers, they want to be much more engaged for their end consumers, in addition to the be much more engaged for the whole value chain, you know. So we already developed the connected pack as a concept. This gives the customers, or let us say the manufacturers, much more engagement for their products, for their lines performance even, and I'm talking here about manufacturing control, the quality control, supply chain control, all of that. They want to be much more familiar about what is the insights of their end consumer, how they can improve the brand image, the reality of their end consumers as well. So we can see a significant improvement, by 24% since last year, from those customers whom are requesting to have connected pack solutions.
Yeah, lots more asking, and therefore you kind of moving into the solutions. Gori, did you see anything in particular there that surprised you? Are you surprised at the massive increase there in terms of people planning or brands planning to use connected packaging?
So from that perspective, no, it's not that surprising, and actually it goes back to what Paul had shared about COVID playing a role in the resurgence of the importance of QR codes, for instance, and how much people are engaging with it, and that people are now expecting to see it, and when they see it, they know, hey, this is something for me to engage, whether it's on pack or on your TV screen on the ads. The one thing, though, that I wanted to kind of plant the seed as food for thought is this idea of gamification. So I saw in the survey that gamification is something that people or brands would want to use to engage with younger consumers. Working on a brand that serves people 55 plus and older, I would say gamification is just as important for them, if not more important. I know it's something that we use as a service to provide to our consumers. The reason for that is, the number one concern for the older age group is around maintaining mental sharpness, mental health. And as a part of that, in addition to good nutrition and exercise, games is a way to do it. It also promotes, social connectivity as well. So I would say don't discard, gamification as an option for the older consumers as well.
No, that's a really great point. A really great point. Thank you for that. Urban, I'm going to move to you a little bit, because one of the things that was surprising to me was the NFC versus QR codes. We saw 45.5% for NFC, 31 using QR, and it must be said 22% to be using both. Did you find that surprising? Do you find that reflective of the market at the moment?
Yeah, so being from Avery Dennison SmartTrack, obviously I'm representing the technology provider in this case, and the history of Avery Dennison is actually from the label side that carries the QR code in this case. And now what we see with the so-called smart labels, where the NFC has been added, actually in the same label, provides this combination of new technology and legacy barcodes and 2D barcodes. And obviously a key from the technology standpoint is the fact that the mobile phones that we all carry now all the time can read a barcode, but it can also use an NFC inlay. And that's a key, of course, both for iPhones and for Androids. The fact that it's more than half that is actually using the NFC, I would say, makes sense, because NFC actually provides a true uniqueness in terms of codes. It comes with a chip, comes with the technology. So it's not only providing the connection with the consumer, but it also provides brand protection and true uniqueness. You can't copy an NFC, you can copy a barcode. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And of course, with the NFC tags, you can do things like understand the temperature at which the product is at, where of course you can't do that with the QR. So there's definitely some differences there. Gregor, I know that you're using both of those. What do you find is your experience? Why do you use both QR codes and NFC tags?
Well, when you use both of them, I would say that it makes sense, because if you have a label that you print a QR code on, that same label can also have the NFC inlay. So practically, when you apply this to the product, you can do that in the same at the same time as you normally attach that label. So that really makes sense. And also one other feature that these NFC labels can have is tamper protection, for example, or tamper detection, which means that you can use it also for temperature, as you mentioned, but also to control if someone have opened a lid or something. So it's much more versatile and much more useful, I would say, than just the barcodes. But the combination is perfect. Combining these two really makes sense.
Thank you. Gregor, over to you. Again, you're using both of those at Kellogg's, and what's the reason for that? What's your experience?
Well, the first thing I'd say, Jenny, is that the one thing that hasn't been discussed so far is that a lot of manufacturers experimented with QR codes about 10 years ago. But at that point, the adoption rate wasn't high. The technology, you needed to have specific apps on your phone in order to be able to use them. Now, the technology is absolutely everywhere. So all you've got to do is scan it with a mobile phone and automatically things like QR codes work, which makes the adoption rate a lot easier. And so manufacturers like Kellogg's being able to put QR codes onto our packaging enables us to make our packaging a lot more interactive. It enables us to communicate information like ingredients in a much bigger font than you would normally find on a product the size of a Mars bar or on a nutritional bar. We can communicate brand values. We can engage by adding dynamic content onto our packaging. And, like you said, we can run gamification and things like that for some of our brands. Pringles in particular, gamification is a really interesting route that we're going to. We use NFC tags to track products as we're shipping it. So it's still not come to a cost yet where we can put an NFC tag into a pack of cornflakes or into a tube of Pringles cost effectively. But we can use it on pallets, we can use it on cases so that we can track where they're going, where they're sitting in the world, and understand, make sure that they have actually reached their destination if a retailer claims to us that they haven't. So there's a huge amount of different things that we can do with it, both consumer facing, but also to benefit our business.
That's really interesting. So looking at the NFC for logistics, distribution, being able to kind of see things from the internal use. And then I think you mentioned something really interesting that we haven't mentioned, which is about the interactive experience for the consumer. But particularly if you are visually impaired, being able to see those ingredients in a font that you can actually make bigger, right? And I think that's a really great point.
I mean, one really interesting thing, I used to work for a pharmaceutical company, and 5 years ago, we were experimenting with QR codes because at the moment, when you buy painkillers, you get these tiny little leaflets inside the box that has 50 different languages on it. Nobody ever reads them, but there's some really important information on that. Using QR codes and NFC tags allows you to be able to display that information in a very different format. So you can use video to explain to people what is inside the pack and what the potential side effects might be. Now that hasn't really put on a huge amount yet in terms of its products, but it's coming. It's going to become more and more commonplace because it's a really useful way of displaying content in different languages, in different markets, without having to change your packaging massively.
Yeah, absolutely. You're not confined by space, nor printing costs, or the ability to, or you have the ability to be able to change that information at will, which of course is really. I love the example you say there about the pharmaceutical products, because everyone just kind of chucks that out, and you look at it, and there's no way a person in Gory's audience group segment of over 55s are going to be able to read that without squinting. I mean, that's just the way it is. So that's a really great point that you make there. So there was a massive jump. There was a lot of change there in terms of brands using and thinking about connected packaging, and we've heard about some of the great reasons for that. But let's not forget there were 18.5% of participants who are not taking advantage of connected experiences, and around 50% of those justified their answer saying that they were thinking but not ready to use it. Mohammed, what can they do, in your opinion, to take that step forward and incorporate this innovation?
Actually, it's a very difficult question, but how we can encourage our customers, our partners, for using the connected pack by identifying the pinpoints. This is the main core for motivation or for promoting any kind of sales. Okay, so by identifying the pinpoints and addressing those pinpoints in a proper way, this will help a lot for guiding the customers towards the solutions which is relevant to their pinpoints. So one of those pinpoints is quality defects, because cost of poor quality as an average with a worldwide standard is costing the customers a ratio of 15%, okay, from their operational costs, okay. Therefore, if we can highlight such number for the customers, for the manufacturers, and encourage them for using a new methodologies, which should be much more digitized, and highlighting the benefits behind. This will help a lot for approaching the manufacturers in a better way. So identifying the customer, first of all, as defines customer pain points, allocating the right solution, the right relevant solution. So in that case of the cost of poor quality, we are talking about traceability using the connected back concept, okay? This one. And if also if the customer is looking to improve the reputation, the branding, the end consumer loyalty, this will come under the digital marketing and how they can collect much more feedback from the end consumer. So we are talking about the two main concepts. The first one is traceability, okay, and the second one is the digital marketing as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so matching their objectives and their pain points with the things that connected packaging can help them with. Yeah, absolutely, that makes good sense to me. Some of the other reasons were too expensive, too complicated, or some even saying not required. What do you think, Paul? What are your thoughts on these responses? What can we do as an industry to help people to understand, to match, as Mohammed is saying, the benefits with the pain points? Yeah,
I just think it's a general lack of sort of awareness. It's not, for some people, and it's inevitable, not everyone is going to be on board. It's just it's not necessarily on their radar. So I think it's the responsibility of the industry, all of us on the panel and watching, to sort of extol the virtues of connected packaging in its all its forms as a very cost-effective and useful way of engaging consumers, and all the other benefits in terms of anti-counterfeiting and data collection and all that kind of stuff goes with it. I think it's and it's working because you've shown the first figures of the amount of people now where it's on their radar and it's actually being used. So I think it's inevitable. You're always going to have some outliers, and you know, that is getting down, reducing year on year, it would seem.
Yeah, no, absolutely. A little bit more education for those who aren't aware, I think, is what you're saying, Paul. So that sounds good enough there. Gori, you know, one of the reasons that I saw there was customers don't use it, and you've already revealed a nice fact about gamification in your audience. Of course, you're already using QR codes on your products, as we've established. That's for the over 55 generation as a majority. Tell us a little bit more about the experience. Tell us a little bit more around the users and what you're finding from your perspective.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, with our audience, what we find, and I think people underestimate, you know, the 55 plus audience, but, you know, 71% of them are already using QR codes. They're very comfortable using them. They use it predominantly to, you know, get more information about products, to look at reviews, to look at demos, videos, and also as a way to get access to products that they may not be able to purchase in store. So our category is one where, you know, most of the shopping is done in store, but, you know, if they're not able to access a product, because, you know, we have had situations where product isn't always available, then, you know, seeing if it's available online. Having said that, though, you know, it's interesting that our start with the QR code actually was because of regulatory reasons. There was, you know, we had to have that QR code on there to convey certain information to our consumers about our products. But with the rise of the engagement with QR codes, what we are looking to do is to transform it so that it is more about engagement, staying connected, especially with a lot of these purchases happening through brick and mortar still. You know, this is a way for us to stay connected with them as a brand, and continue to give them the information and the connection that they're seeking as well.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. And so it's kind of benefiting both your online and offline. Gregor, what about your online? I mean, obviously you're coming from the e-commerce department. You might say, well, if you're already purchasing a product online, then you know who that consumer is. Are there any other benefits to connected packaging for e-com?
Oh, look, there can be lots of benefits of connected packaging to e-commerce. And the thing you've got to remember is that up until a few years ago, the pack that we were selling was a very static medium, and millions could be spent on redesigning a box once every 3 years or 4 years. Now, with the advent of connected packaging, there's a lot more that we can do. It becomes a dynamic medium. We can bring it to life. We can create targeted media and interact with our customers in different ways. You know, we do customer incentives as a manufacturer. So, you know, we'll give away tickets to, you know, Merlin passes or games via Pringles and things like that. You know, we can start building campaigns that are much more focused on our target audience, engage them in different ways. And we can start building that two-way relationship, because when we run games, when we do surveys, when we do customer incentives, we can collect information and we can then use it to target and retarget and engage our customers in different ways and bring them back to different platforms or back to our own platform to find out more. So those are really important things, you know, and digital commerce is all about the full funnel. It's all about finding your customer, building relevance, and then converting them into purchase. And connected packaging allows us to build relevance, which is hugely important, because otherwise we're just competing with everybody else. This gives us a point of difference.
Absolutely. Point of difference, and that engagement experience, bringing something additional to the consumer. That's massive, I feel, especially in the experiences that we create. The main benefits that our respondents mentioned were data collection, which you talk about there, Gregor, but also the education and information to consumers about the products, about marketing decisions, sustainability. We saw that was a massive trend coming through as well. And of course, that possibility to have that direct interaction. Mohammed, have you any particular example or client that's using connected packaging in a dynamic and effective way? Any kind of brand or campaign that you can give an example for?
Yeah, actually, there are 4 customers. They used to run the campaign using the dynamic connected pack. 2 in Brazil, 1 in China, and another 1 in Saudi Arabia. So the branding in my mind now is Langero in Brazil, and which we run too many campaigns actually using the dynamic connected pack. That's what I have in my mind now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's a great example, and I think that was around ingredients in terms of what was inside the product as well. Urban, have you any particular examples or anything different in the way that your customers are using connected packaging?
Well, I think, as Gregor alluded to, there's a lot of opportunities when you connect with the consumer, of course. One that we might not have mentioned this far is related to sustainability and to managing of waste, for example, packaging waste. That's one use case. Mm-hmm. Bringing awareness to the consumer, how to take care of the products or the rest products, so to say. Waste in food applications as well, mm-hmm. To reduce, you know, the waste of food, but also give ideas on how to use the product in a better way. I think some of the use cases.
Yeah, no, definitely some good other use cases. Gori, the reason that Boost started using connected packaging in the very beginning, why was that? I think it's something different that we haven't mentioned yet.
Yeah, so as I'd mentioned before, it was due to regulatory reasons. So essentially, we needed a way to let our consumers know about, what ingredients are in our products are GMO versus non-GMO. And I think Gregor, made mention of this earlier about how QR codes gives you a way to communicate information to your consumers that you can't necessarily squeeze onto your pack. If you were to see our packs today, there's a lot of information on there. And this would have been yet one more thing that we would have had to squeeze in. So we use the QR code to convey that information. Which is important, right? This is what consumers were seeking transparency on. And this was our way to provide it to them. And what we want to do is to continue to build on that, on that property that we've got now set onto our packaging by going beyond, transparency about our ingredients, about our recipes, but also then start to use it as a tool for engagement, whether it's through our loyalty program, share about new launches, incorporate gamification, as I'd mentioned before, because that's what our consumers are also looking for. And then, providing social connectivity and building a community within the brand users that we have.
No, I think that's a really good point that you make. And Urban talked also about recycling information. You talk about ingredients and legal requirements, legislation, actually pushing you to make that first decision. And I think there's a lot of new legislation that's moving, certainly across Europe. I know, obviously, you're based in the States, but I can see that there is a lot of legislation, particularly at the moment with France, but that will be moving across the rest of Europe in terms of being able to talk about the ingredients, but also how to recycle, which is what Urban you were mentioning, and the kind of traceability, which again, Mohammed, you mentioned as well. So I think there's a lot there that's going to move things forward. Gamification is a great one, so I'm really glad to hear that you're going to move that into gamification. Paul, over to you. Have you got any good examples that you've seen in terms of smart packaging with gamification or otherwise?
Yeah, so I think we've got this innovation zone platform, so we're finding lots of new initiatives, and I think there's a sort of few that two or three that I can pick out. First one is the refill and reuse market is growing significantly. Lots of players are working out how to get refill packaging normalized, and QR codes and RFID codes or tags can play a really good part in the collation and supply chain management, the cleaning, the organization of those products. I think that's and there's lots of examples. And you mentioned France. There's all sorts of regulations around businesses having to have reusable packaging in their supply chain in restaurants and things like that. Germany's just gone down that way. So the requirement to have an easy to use system using QR codes and RFID tags for the cleaning is something we're definitely seeing. Also, quite an interesting one from Toppen in Japan, who have just developed an NFC tag using paper material as a substrate for the antennae instead of conventional PET. So that makes it more certainly more consumer friendly in terms of the reduced amount of plastic, and it's also a thinner material as well. It's slightly more sustainable. So sustainability is obviously another major driver, and that's sort of influencing changes. And I guess the third one, which I can't really ignore, which is one of the best executions or initiatives we've seen in the last 12 months, is the NaviLens thing, which is about tags to, as it was already been mentioned, to make the hard of seeing easier to read important information on packs. Now, obviously, Kellogg have done it, and we've also seen P&G with Ariel, Aunt Bess's, and Coca-Cola. So I don't see a good reason why most major brands shouldn't have the NaviLens tag on future packs. I think it's an excellent idea. And I think there's some stat I read recently that only 7% of blind and partially sighted people can actually use Braille. So this seems to me like a really good alternative to ensure that they get all the necessary information, and also an opportunity for them to engage with the brand as well.
Absolutely. A great way to be able to be much more inclusive in terms of consumers and support them, which is a great win if you're looking for differentiation, which, you know, Gregor mentioned earlier as well. If you can make your audience feel included, then of course, no matter who you are, you're going to feel more affinity with that brand. Going back to gamification, we saw that 55% chose a traditional mobile game, 30% chose an AR game, 11.3% chose a quiz. What do you think about those decisions, Gregor? I mean, do you agree with those? Is that the type of way that you are seeing gamification being used?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I think a lot of it is coming down to who the target audience of the different brands are. Although I do find really interesting that gamification is important for the over 50s as well. I look forward to seeing my parents playing mobile games based off of something that they picked up on pack, although I think it could be a long time before that happens. I think certainly as the technology progresses, we'll see more diversification in terms of how QR codes and NFC tags are used and what the basis of gamification is going to be. I do find it interesting that quizzes aren't being used as much, particularly as it's a really interesting way of gathering consumer information without the consumer necessarily knowing that you are just asking them questions to find out information about themselves or about what they're buying. You know, certainly in the industry that I work in, one of the holy grail pieces of information isn't just what customers have bought, but what they've bought with it. And you can use gamification to understand what else was in the customer's basket so that you can then start creating collaborations. You can start doing really interesting need-based bundling, which is, again, the direction that digital commerce is likely to go in the next few years, is it's going to be a lot more need-focused rather than specific product focus. So using gamification to gather that information without your customer necessarily knowing that that's what you're actively going to try and do is a really great way of gaining information and making it valuable and sort of added value to the customer at the same time.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. I found it a bit a little bit surprising that quiz was quite so low on the list, but I also wonder if the thought of asking maybe 1 or 2 or 3 questions, you know, how often do you buy this product? Have you bought this product before? When do you consume this product? Even just, you know, 3 questions, being able to understand consumer behavior. One of the things that kind of came into my mind was, is it the fact that we said quiz that makes it sound, oh, that sounds really boring, whereas actually a couple of questions is also a quiz. That was kind of one of my thoughts there. But it's definitely, like you say, a massively insightful way to be able to get the information from the consumer and in real time. So yeah, I completely agree with that. We've got a question coming from the audience, Paul, which was around the Navigens tag. Which market do you say Coca-Cola are using that in, asks Alan.
They are using it in, I can look it up now. It's a pilot and it is in the UK market. So yeah, over the Christmas period, on Christmas multi-packs, 24 and 30 can collations. So yeah, so they're so that's a UK execution.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Urban, we actually have a question you might be able to help us with. This is from MT, and they ask, is there a price difference? Well, there is a price difference. What is the price difference between a QR code and an NFT tag stroke label? Have you got any kind of price points for us?
Yeah, so it depends on the type of NFC inlay used, of course, but I can give a ballpark price, which is like 10 to 15 US cent in this volume. But we prefer to look at the benefits, of course, adding this technology and the adding a digital twin. So it makes sense, as you could see from the survey, to more than 50% of the respondents to use NFC.
Yeah, it's definitely come down an awful lot in cost. It was a lot more expensive before. I know when we were trying to work with some very early customers, NFC tags on FMCG goods just didn't work out. The margins are too small there to then be able to absorb that. But I think that might still be true for FMCG, but the cost has massively come down in terms of the NFC tag. Moving back to some of the questions that I've got in mind, and I think that one of those is really around the insight option. There's definitely a huge difference in opportunities. We saw there that over 50% were talking about gathering emails, phone numbers, etc. Education seemed to score low on that question. Do you think that education is something that the NFC tags are used for, Urban?
Question for me. Yeah. So, well, education is one thing, but I think key is, depending, of course, what system you have behind that gathers this information, but it's connecting packaging with consumers in real time. I think the timing aspect of the connection and the tools behind that analysis you can get with connecting to consumers across the globe for your product opens up the different possibilities, including the awareness, how to manage the waste, how to use the product. You can even use the technology to enable the use of products because it provides this uniqueness. And you can also do that, of course, with the QR code, but then it requires some kind of encryption, and so it becomes much more complicated. The NFC technology, the RFID technology, as we call it, is very straightforward and supported by the consumer mobile phone. So that's the key, I think.
Okay, yeah, perfect. Well, as we come to our final minutes, I really wanted to ask my main question, which is, do you feel that we are moving to a place where everything will be connected, and in fact, customers will be looking at products, looking for the QR code? Do you think that's a fantasy of mine, or can you see that being a reality? And I'm just going to come round to each of you to close up the webinar and get your opinion on that. So I'll start with yourself, Mohammed. How do you feel about connected packaging? Can you envisage a time in the future where everything will be connected and consumers will be actively looking for the QR code?
I'm really confident about that, because we can feel that, and we can even recognize that all of the end consumer need to be much more familiar and engaged for their products which in their hands. Okay, this is the first one. And second one is the manufacturers, they want to be much more engaged and to have the full control of their products in the manufacturing process as well. So connected packaging solution is a perfect one for achieving that target, either for the end consumer and for manufacturers.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mohammed. Paul, over to you.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those trends that will just continue to grow over many years, and we'll get to the point where it's as ubiquitous as the barcode. You know, everyone will be, you'll be connecting to packs, and it will be by exception. You know, it'll be unusual. We're moving to the so-called Internet of Things world, and I can only see it increasing and going in one direction.
Thank you, Paul. Gregor, how are you feeling? Do you agree?
Yeah, I do agree. I mean, I think within the next 5 years, for the vast majority of categories within FMCG and CPG, digital generations are going to become the predominant generation in the marketplace. They'll become the biggest customers. As the baby boomers continue to die out and the other older generations stop being the dominant customers, the digital generations are going to expect packaging to be more dynamic. They're going to expect more from the products that they're buying, and stop just buying an item and start buying more of an experience. So I would expect that more packaging will become dynamic. Maybe not all of it, but some of it. More of it will become dynamic and will be used for a whole load of different reasons, not just linking to ingredients and nutritional information, but to inspire use, to convey messages, to link to social media, to really build more around the brand rather than just, here's my product, buy it from a shelf.
Yeah, I love that, and I love the fact that everyone feels that it's going to be the exception as the digital generation gets older. Gori, that kind of goes nicely into your answer there. Again, coming from that slightly older perspective, how do you feel? Is that something where it's going to be as ubiquitous as the barcode?
Look, I mean, the change has already started, right? So the boomers are starting it, right? And it's going to continue to become even more of a necessity as more and more people age into the target age group for this brand. And to Gregor's point, I think it's going to have to go beyond providing basic information and provide an experience. And as the Internet of Things becomes, more common and in day-to-day life, also providing convenience, ease of use. The minute you put, you slide in, a 6-pack of our product, does it connect in, kind of click into their refrigerator, and based on whatever's on that pack, kind of give an update of, okay, you've got your stock for the week, and once it's done, hey, put it on the shopping list, and time to refill. So I can see it becoming a daily part of everything that's being done, and yeah, it will become an expectation as we continue to move into the future.
Yeah, no, I desperately need a fridge that tells me the recipes I can create with the things I've got left in it. I really need that, so hurry up. Irvin, over to you. Are you going to continue the positive streak, or are you going to fall on the other side of the fence?
No, I think that we at Avery Dennison, of course, believe in a future with all items having a digital ID and a digital twin in the cloud and so on, and all the opportunities that gives us. And we see the adaptation is growing year on year at a significant rate from different use cases, and connected packaging is also, I would say, an expectation from consumers, not only the immediate connection on a product to get maybe a quiz or some connection on where this product comes from and so on, but also in terms of expectation on traceability of products and the origin of products. And that also relates to the brand protection and authenticity of a product. I think that makes sense for both the producer of the products, but also for the consumer. I think we are increasingly more concerned about where things comes from and how to use them well.
Yes, absolutely. Most definitely. There's so many different use cases, and I think more and more of that's going to be pushed from audience demanding legislation, technology advancements, and everything else. So, it's been a fantastic panel. Thank you so much for all of your fantastic views. As Alan's just mentioned, a fantastic array of different experiences, and I've really enjoyed this panel. So thank you very much. And I will share the slides. I will share the research as well. And there's some questions we haven't even had a chance to get to. So again, I will share those around. It leaves me one last quick thing to do, which is obviously to pick the winner of the respondents survey, and that goes to, drumroll, Takuya Onuki, which I hope I've pronounced correctly. Congratulations to you. We'll obviously follow up with yourself privately as well. So thank you again. That leaves me to say nothing else, but I wish you all a very good day and a great week ahead. Thanks very much.